title of my sermon is You Reap What He Sows. This sermon is 5 minutes, so let's get straight into the text. Turn with me to Galatians 6:9. Galatians 6:9. And it says, "So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up." In the book of Galatians, Paul is addressing a generation of people who believe that their works not only save them, but define them. In the first 2 chapters of the book, Paul has to re-educate the people on what the gospel actually is. They've misunderstood the gospel to be about what they give up instead of about what Christ has given up for them. By doing this, they began to place more value on their works instead of the works of Jesus Christ. And in the 6th chapter of Galatians, Paul introduces a powerful insight that should give freedom to every believer. However, we often understand this insight to mean we reap what we sow. But if this was the point that Paul was trying to get across to a church that relied on works, how would that have been helpful? Are any of you familiar with the term germination? Anyone? Okay. Germination is the development of a plant from a seed or spore after a period of dormancy. Now, dormancy is a big word. Dormancy is a period in an organism's life cycle when growth, development, and physical activity are temporarily stopped. This conserves the energy of the organism. So, we have heard Paul say, let's not get tired of doing what's good. In other words, conserve your energy. It was never about you in the first place. But just like God does in the development of a plant, sometimes he has to temporarily stop growth, development, and physical activity in our lives to remind us who planted us in the first place. Many of us equate our movement with God's movement. If we're doing a lot, then God's doing a lot.
Right.
If we're not doing that much, God's not doing that much either. But it's only when we are stopped that we can actually see that God is moving on our behalf. And don't forget this. Just because you've stopped temporarily doesn't mean God has. He's God. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't need to. So when germination comes, when harvest comes, we realize it was not because of what we did, but instead because of what God did in spite of us. So what Paul's actually saying is, it's not that we reap what we sow, we reap what God sows. So the verse ends saying, at just the right time, we'll reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. If we don't give up what? Paul tells us in the first 2 chapters of the book, if we don't give up remembering that God is responsible for the harvest. Not our works, not our neighbor's works, but God's. Maybe you've been in a season where you feel like your physical activity has temporarily stopped. Maybe you feel like you don't have the same ministry opportunities that you had before. Maybe you feel like you've been doing the right thing for so long and you're still single.
My Lord.
If you feel this way, I want to invite you to take some time in this season of dormancy to connect with the one who started it all. Remind yourself that God is still good and that God is still working no matter what season you're in. Just like you were saying in your
Amen. Amen.
It's never been about our works. The only reason our works are even pleasing to God is because the blood of Christ covers our iniquities and makes our filthy rags pleasing in the sight of the Lord. So if you've understood this message and you want to make a public declaration to God to let him know, God, I get it. I understand it now. You're responsible for the harvest, not me. I invite you to stand with me in